So you, your family, your friends, somebody you know are moving to an English-speaking country. And you really want to learn how to speak English fluently like a native speaker. Here are the 5 tips that I've learned to speak English like a native speaker. I am an expert at this topic because I walk every step of the way. Good morning, everybody. How are you guys today? So it's about 6:40 in the morning and I've been up since 5:30 making this video, so I hope you enjoy it. So today we're going to talk about one of the most popular questions that I get asked all the time. The questions are, what are your tips for learning English? How do you learn to speak English so well? How do you speak English like a native person? And it's way long overdue, so I decided to make this video today to give you guys some tips. I think I'm asked this a lot because I wasn't born a native English speaker. What that means is English was not my first language. But I think my English is actually pretty decent, and that's not a pat on the back or anything. I just think that I have lived here long enough and have learned the language long enough to basically get a grasp of it. Here are the 5 tips that I've learned to speak English like a native speaker. And I would say I'm 85-90% there. Tip number 1, you should listen. Listen carefully. Listen with intent. What I mean by that is to actually learn better English, you need to listen. It's actually more important to learn to listen than it is to learn to speak. Just like any language, Vietnamese, Chinese, where it's actually critical is the accent, the tone, the speech pattern that you can mimic of the native speaker. But it goes with any language. When I try to teach my wife Vietnamese to talk to my parents, I'll link a video up here somewhere. She asked me to repeat myself multiple times so she could learn my speech pattern, my intonation, the tone, the pitch, where I put emphasis on certain words, so she could try and mimic that so it sounds more accurate. And just like anything else, if you're going to practice or learn, you need to learn it from the pros. The ones that do it every day. The ones that were born with it. Or the ones that at least, grew up with it. Because why would you learn from somebody who's not? So what that means is you need to watch movie, watch TV, watch YouTube videos like mine, for instance, right? It's got me speaking, it's got my wife speaking, it's got other people speaking, all English. How's that for a shameless plug? Listen to the radio, but seriously, you got to learn by listening. These are great places to hear real English speakers speak. You might pick up a new word, a new vocabulary here, a new phrase that you haven't learned before and apply it to your arsenal. Honestly, over the years, from watching videos and all that, I have learned words that I have no clue what they mean in Vietnamese. I just use them as part of my daily vocabulary because I know I learned when to use them, how to use them. I have no clue what they mean in my native tongue. Number 2 is actually very important, which is learn the idioms or the slangs. That's something you don't learn from a textbook. You learn these things from listening to people talk. Idioms and slangs are phrases that have hidden meanings. What that means is when you first listen to it, it sounds funny at first. You don't know what it means. And in context, you really don't know what it means. But if you know what the phrase is used for, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And if you don't know these phrases, it might confuse you in a conversation because they're widely used. Some examples are in the blink of an eye. What that means is it's really fast, or it's a piece of cake. Or if I'm using, doing that, it's a piece of cake, it's just going to confuse you. What does that mean? That means it's really easy. Or beat around the bush. My wife actually does that a lot. She beats around the bush. So we'll be talking about a topic and she just go round and round and round and round and round, never hit on the topic, the main point. So knowing these phrases will add a level of sophistication to your vocabulary, but also helps you in daily conversation because they're widely used. There are similar ones in Vietnamese that I've learned that sometimes I use with my parents and they just laugh at me. One of them is Gần bậc thì đen, gần đèn thì sáng. What that means is you start to become like the crowd that you hang out with, your friends. Oh, this one is actually pretty good. I found it. I was doing research for this and I found it and I just didn't. I had to put it in here. It says male, king male yadui, as in a cat praises its cat tail being long, or you patting yourself on the back. But sometimes you don't pat yourself, it may not get patted, right? Anyway, just know that these phrases could be region specific. If you go to a southern state, territory, it might be different than northern ones. That's why they call it slangs. Okay, so number 3, somewhat debatable, but if you're gonna learn, you need to learn from an authentic material. If you're gonna learn to speak English, learn from a true English speaker. And so I'm not talking about, no diss on people who are teaching English in these countries, but if you want to speak like a native speaker, you need to listen to a native speaker, right? You may not have direct access to people who speak English all the time in your country. So go online, go on YouTube, listen to people who speak English all the time. And they don't have to be native born, like myself. I'm not native born, but I feel like my English is pretty good. When I was doing research for this video, I was looking up, in Vietnamese and in English, speaking English like native people. And there are all these people that showed up, but if you don't listen carefully, they don't speak like English people. The pitches are not right, the tones are not right. And it's not bad to learn from them, but it's not the way for you to learn. So let me clear the air on something real quick. If you want to learn to speak English, I strongly believe that, and it's a personal belief, that you should learn to speak English like a native English speaker. I was talking to my brother the other day, and we were joking around, and my brother is still living in Vietnam, and he said, "Oh, I'm teaching an English class as a teaching assistant." And I jokingly with him, I said, "Oh, you should sign me up because I need some extra income and I could really teach English for a couple of reasons. 1, I live in the United States. 2, I do have a master's degree in engineering, so I do know the language pretty well." And he said, "Oh no, they're not interested in you teaching English. They don't like the native pronunciations. They prefer for us to teach it wrong but correct so we could communicate." I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. If you're learning English, but you don't want to speak it like an English speaker, why are you even learning English to begin with, right? Do you have any thoughts about that? You should leave a comment down below. Number 4 and number 5 are 2 equally important points, and I think they're the most important points of all. Number 4 is practice. 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 You have to be willing to use the language all the time, just like anything else. Anything else that you're going to do, whether it's play sports, drive a car, eat, edit videos. If you want to be good, you have to be willing to practice. Let me tell you a story. When I first came to Canada and then the United States, when I first came here, I knew some of the words, but I didn't know the words. For me to do my homework, when I first came, I had to translate from English to Vietnamese, do it in Vietnamese, then translate back in English. And that was before Google, that was before anything. They didn't have Google Translate then. At that time, it was popular with these little tablets where you can type it in and it'll translate for you, but only the rich kid gets that. I didn't ask my parents to buy it because of how expensive my school was. Some of the ways you can practice, as I mentioned above, watch movies, watch TV, watch YouTube, listen to the radio, listen to music. The more you surround yourself with it, the more you pick it up. And listen and repeat. So when you listen to it on TV, try to repeat the words. That's what I do. Still today, that's what I do. If there are words that I can't pronounce just right, I repeat it to myself, and I repeat it to myself. What you should do is surround yourself with English speakers. I didn't really have this choice when I first came to Canada when I was 12 years old. I had 6 cousins who were in school with me who all spoke English. All my friends at that point were English speakers. So it forced me to learn the language. It forced me to communicate. It forced me to want to learn the language, because or else I'm just left out of the conversation. So that was really a blessing in disguise. Sometimes I was struggling then because I'm like, there's no one here that speaks my language except for my uncle and aunts, but it actually helped me. And the more you use it, the more you learn. What I see all the time, because I live in a university town, there are a lot of people that come to Auburn, a lot of people that live here. And a lot of foreigners come here every year to try and go to Auburn University because it's very well renowned. What I see all the time, even when I was in college, was people, especially international exchange students, like to stick together in a group. So Chinese students Vietnamese student, or Asian. They just stick together. And I'm like, why did you do that? And I understand why. It's part of the comfort zone, right? It's the same people who speak the same language, who eat the same thing. But what that keeps you from doing is expand. It keeps you from forcing yourself to learn. Instead of speaking English 100% of the time or 90% of the time, you're only speaking English 20% of the times when you're in class. Other than that, you're speaking Vietnamese to your friends or Chinese to your friends 80% of the other time. You're not getting the same practice. I know I'm rambling on about this a lot, but it is important. And lastly, number 5, which is what a lot of people don't like, is be willing to struggle. Everyone who's good at something struggle, and you just gotta learn, you gotta grind. I speak from experience. I feel like in this topic, I really am patting myself on the back, but I am an expert at this topic because I walk every step of the way. I struggle every day when I first came here, and I still struggle today because it's a whole new language that you're learning. I still struggle how to say some words today. For example, warm and warm. You know, one is that little squirrely thing and one is the temperature. Because of the tone, I can't get that tone right if I speak too fast. So what I do in these instances is I slow myself down and then I try to remember what I learned, how to say it, and then I say it. So just slow down a little bit. I still struggle with grammar today. Sometimes you probably pick it up on my videos. I mean, I know it happened. I put S's where they don't belong and I leave out S's where they do belong. English is a very tricky language. That's not an excuse. It just happens. I try to learn every day. What I would do is I would ask my friends, I ask my wife, I ask my parents. I say, hey, when I make a mistake, let me know, correct me, teach me, so I can master it, so I don't make that same mistake anymore. Funny story. I drafted an email to I'm gonna say a friend a while back, and I actually put S on a word that doesn't belong. I'm gonna use an example, grammar. Well, grammars is not a thing, but I actually say, can you help me with my grammars? Example, this individual laughed at me. I just laughed it off. I said, okay, okay, that's not where it belongs. But what I did was, while I laughed it off, I am grateful that they made fun of me because that's a friend. But I learned and I put it to memory. I have not made that mistake again. I'm grateful because when it is to somebody who's important, to my boss, I don't make that mistake anymore. So I grind through that. I learned that and I mastered it. And that's what the point number 5. Well, so those are the 5 points. But for this, if there's time left on here, I think I'm at like 30 minutes already. But if there's time left, I'll tell you a story, a funny story about English speaker with Asian people. So I was flying into Atlanta about 3 years ago. And I was on this escalator getting off the train to leave. And these 2 Vietnamese lady, I know they're Vietnamese because I heard them talking, looked at me and said, do you know where this stop is? Just like that. Like they slow it down, they stretch it out. And I looked at them and I was like, yes ma'am, the stop is here. So I said, if you follow me, I'll take you there. And there is this like shocking look on their face. I guess because of my English skill. They just looked at me like, oh, how does this guy speak English like that? But I just want to put it out there. And if you guys are not native speakers, you would understand this. You slowing it down, stretching it out, and say it louder does not make it any easier to understand. It just offends the other person. And I'm like, so if you don't think I know how to speak English well enough, why are you even asking me for direction? And one thing that I learned that's really helpful is read out loud. Sometimes I would read out loud to myself so I can hear myself. I'm here to pitch, I'm here to tones, and I try to mimic what I hear on TV or radio and stuff like that. So to recap all of this, pull it all together. The 5 points are, you need to listen. That's very important because you can learn the tone, the pitch, and all that from a native speaker. Learn the idioms and the slang because it helps you understand the conversation better, it helps you learn the conversation better, it helps you be a part of the conversation better. Use authentic material. Listen to people who speak English all the time. I mean, you know who they are, right? Depends on your region. Just listen to those people. Don't go and listen to a Chinese guy that's teaching you English that don't really speak English well himself. Practice, 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 right? You just got to practice. I mean, I still practice today. I'm sure some English speakers, native-born English speakers, still practice today. They just happen to be born with it. But practicing well enough to where you think in the language. And lastly, be willing to struggle. You just have to be willing to struggle to get through it. So, I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm hoping to make it short, but there was a lot. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any other tips, tricks, thoughts, leave it down below. I promise I read every one of them and I reply to every one of them. I don't know if I'm going to put this here or maybe at the beginning. We'll see. One thing I get asked a lot also is if I would be willing to make videos in Vietnamese. And I thought about making this video in Vietnamese, but the problem is I have a lot of subscribers who are not Vietnamese speakers, so I hate to isolate them. If you would like for me to make some videos in Vietnamese with English subtitles, or a mixture of both, Vietnamese and English in the video, leave me a comment down below and I will consider it. If you're new here, thank you for visiting this page. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you've been here before, I appreciate you coming back. I love your support. Love hearing from you every week. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you know anybody who can benefit from this, please share it. If you have any thoughtful advice, leave it down below. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.